LibertyNation.com does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement.
We are the Uprising.
Welcome back to the Uprising, a podcast of LibertyNation.com. I am your host, Scott Cosenza. Thank you for joining us. We've got a big show for you here today with news on the California recall and some original reporting on that you'll find interesting. We have a constitutional ruling about parking enforcement we're going to report on. And the Supreme Court released a couple cases this week that impact liberty, and the big news, returning to the program, Mr. Tim Donner on today's Uprising. All right, let's go ahead and get right into the Supreme Court news. First of all, they ruled against the Biden administration on the Remain in Mexico asylum rule. So Donald Trump's administration put forth this rule that people would have to remain in Mexico while their asylum applications were pending. This was to stop the great hordes of Central Americans who were walking up through Mexico and entering the United States. And previous to the rule change, they would say, okay, well, give us your asylum application, go ahead and welcome to the United States. And then, of course, they would just go and not worry about being in compliance with our immigration laws typically. And Trump put a stop to that by requiring that those folks remain in Mexico while their asylum applications were pending. Well, the Biden administration decided to skip that requirement and just reinstitute the new rule where they get to come into the United States while their applications are pending, but they didn't dot all their I's and cross all their T's while doing so. And just like how the courts were fond of dialing back any number of Donald Trump administration regulations when they didn't dot all their I's, that's what the court did in this instance. They said they didn't follow their own rules for how to implement these changes. And the second thing is this eviction moratorium. What a great ruling for liberty that people's private property is no longer being taken by the government without any kind of compensation. This eviction moratorium that the CDC put in place, really they just invented that they had the power to do it, and they weren't overturned because of the brief nature. At least by the time it got to the Supreme Court, Justice Kavanaugh wrote that he wasn't going to vote to overturn it because it was going to expire soon. Well, they renewed their moratorium, and this time the court ruled 6-3 that it was unconstitutional because there's no way that they were going to win if the full case was briefed before the court. This was an order that came out late at night. It wasn't a full briefed case, but the three liberals, Breyer, Sotomayor, and Kagan, or what passes for them, they for liberals, that what I mean is they're really kind of like statist liberals, but they ruled that they would go ahead and leave the moratorium in place. So it is politics at the Supreme Court. It's interesting that it was straight 6-3 on both issues. It says more than ever, I think, how important it is for those to fight for who we get on the court, no matter what our political or policy prescriptions are. It matters so much. So we'll have to see what that means for the rest of the court's term. Coming up, there's, as we know, a big year. All right, well, it's a big day at the Uprising. We welcome back Tim Donner. Here we go. Welcome back to Liberty Nation, a man of many titles, but I'll stick with founding father of LibertyNation.com, Timothy Elting Donner, who has been on this program more times than I can count, but not of late due to a voice issue, and tough for somebody who has a long history in radio and broadcasting. And he's going to get through it as best as he can to grace us with his presence. So welcome back to the Uprising, Mr. Donner.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
I sort of thought I felt it incumbent to explain how my voice might sound different than what people are used to. You know, Scott, how they talk about in adolescence, your voice changes, right?
Mine
I think I never hit adolescence.
did.
I never hit adolescence. I think the answer is that I had the latest adolescence.
You're a late bloomer.
The latest adolescence in the recorded history, so that my voice didn't change until I was 65 years old. So, you know, welcome to late adolescence. And I've had many people that have told me, yeah, you seem like an adolescent all along. So it all sort of flows together.
Well, that is true to those of us who know you best.
No.
We're gonna.
I did want to say. I did want to say I have one sort of bailout for myself in case the voice becomes, you know, too much of an issue, and that is, if I can't seem to answer a question properly or don't think that I have an answer that's going to add much, I'm just going to say, I'm just going to do
whatever.
All right.
Okay.
Well, let's try to keep that.
And then people won't have to hear any creeping deficiencies in my vocal cords.
Well, let's go ahead and wish you well with this performance, and also that you're allowed to continue frequently on the Uprising. And let's get right into it, because the people have been denied your sage political analysis for too long. Good. And we've got a monster iceberg of political consequence this week, I think. I had a text exchange with some friends talking about the dead service people in Afghanistan and the other victims of the suicide bombing. And they were talking about the body count of the Afghans. And I said, you know, not in a happy way, but I just said politically, those bodies don't matter. It's the dead American U.S. service members that matter politically. Do you agree with that? And what is your sort of global assessment of what does this mean? You know, does Joe Biden get, is it impossible for him to get another term out of, is it that bad, or is it something less than that? What do you see here? We've got a dozen, that's the current body count. I think right now is a dozen dead U.S. service members in Afghanistan this week.
I think as we record, it's 13.
Excuse me. That's right. Baker's dozen.
And dozens injured, not to mention dozens of Afghans killed in those attacks, all of which were predictable because now terrorism has been given, a revival platform in Afghanistan. I think the only safe potential saving grace politically for Biden and Harris, who of course is, by the way, the most unpopular vice president in American history since
Tim, wait a second. Hold on.
It.
I don't know if you're aware of this. She went and honored in Vietnam, the place of John McCain.
Don't get me started. Please don't get me started. I can't get excited, Scott.
All right.
I can't. My voice is going to waver. But I think the only saving grace, I think, for Biden and Harris is that this is happening fairly early in his term. The midterms are not for another, 15 months or so. So the stink of defeat and failure has time to wear off. But I think that the impression that people are getting now is not going to wear off a lot. The polls are showing Joe Biden is down to 41% approval. That's sub-Trump.
Do you agree that he seems to have handled this perhaps the worst possible way in terms of
I think the word is inexplicable, Scott.
Yeah.
It's inexplicable that he
this idea where he's just like going to Camp David and they'll handle it.
How he could take the universal judgment of his military brass, his top diplomatic and political advisors, all of whom said to varying degrees that this kind of quagmire, this kind of disaster would happen if he didn't pull out carefully, and if he pulled out all the troops and then did the evacuation. Look, he refuses to admit that he's wrong, but in essence, his actions were an admission because he took 2,500 troops out. And then what did he do, Scott? He sent 6,000 back in to try and save a situation that was coming apart at the seams. It has frayed our international relationships a lot more than Donald Trump supposedly did during his time, because now, with Afghanistan as a platform for terrorism again, the people in Europe particularly are disgusted and upset with what happened, because the threat of terrorism will now hit them most directly because of their geographical
and that doesn't even count
proximity.
That doesn't even count what this may mean for, I mean, there could be a war over Taiwan in 3 years whose genesis was this, this withdrawal and the way it was handled. In other words, going forward, we don't even know yet what we may have some profound, actions and reactions in the world that just can't even be quantified because of the way.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, and us looking weak, and I mean, there's a way to pull out, and there's a way to pull out, right?
Well, it seems to me, maybe I'm making it too simple, but how do you pull out all your military capacity before?
Right. And not keeping Bagram, the Bagram airport. So
this is not like it's not like some socialist government. This is a terrorist regime that's basically stuck in the 7th century, that executes people for reasons that we wouldn't even turn us.
This is what democracy looks like in Afghanistan, Tim. The people seem to have chosen, and they chose that century.
It's just, I can't tell you, Scott, how, when I start thinking of this one thing, how depressing it is, which is that the same people that enabled 9/11 are now back in charge of the place that we spent trillions of dollars in treasure, not to mention blood, there and Iraq to try and.
Well, you don't think they're going to?
What do we have to show for it?
You don't think we don't even have
we don't even have a lousy T-shirt to show for it.
Well, that's not true, Tim, because they say that a lot of the trillions, and I think I said 1 trillion when I first started talking about this, but now it's up to at least 2 trillion, really the real number, and maybe more than that. A lot of that money stayed right here in the national capital area. It goes through, it's spent on the war, but really this is how Americans are able to use the military industrial complex to generate profits for themselves in many ways, right?
I don't know how you look. Let's look at it in composite. Iraq and Afghanistan combined, it was about $6 trillion. $6 trillion. What'd we get? What'd we get? Did we get stability?
No.
Did we get democracy?
Free oil? No. Democracy? No.
We got nothing.
Yeah. We got a stick in the eye.
Less than nothing.
Right?
We got a humiliation.
Yeah.
A 20-year humiliation. And all the presidents are at fault, and Biden is certainly at fault for this inexplicable and unnecessary international crisis that he stoked. Trump had the basic right idea. We're going to get out because a great overwhelming majority of Americans want to get out, but we're going to do it in a way that assures that if a single American is touched or threatened, that Trump will bomb the crap out of them. Does anybody doubt that he would have done that? Does anybody doubt? Biden, on the other hand, is at the mercy of the Taliban. Just stop to think of that sentence. Joe Biden is at the mercy of the Taliban.
Does the events of this week make it much more or less likely that Donald Trump will be a candidate for president in the next race?
Honestly, Scott, I thought that Trump was finished, and that he would see that his better role would be to be a kingmaker extraordinaire, because he has such incredible influence up and down the Republican Party. And that way, the thing I've always said about Trump is what matters to him more than anything else is winning. And I thought that he would come to the conclusion that he could not win after January 6th. I think if January 6th hadn't happened, I would sit here saying I think he could not only run again, but he would win, that he could win again. After January 6th, it's so easy to scare people about Trump and what would happen if he returns that I seriously doubt his ability to win again, which is why someone like DeSantis, with the same politics, but not the personality, has been more broadly acceptable to some people who supported Trump before. But no question, given that it seems like all the indicators are he's going to run again. Yeah, I think this does make it more likely, because here's the thing, Scott, and I'm writing about this for Liberty Nation. He now has to actually prove, incredibly, he landed the spot as a leader of the free world. And yet, for the first time, he has to actually prove that he's not incompetent, that he's
I will tell
the Peter principle, that he has not risen to his level of incompetence. He no longer gets the benefit of the doubt and the incredible unbroken string of luck that he had that landed him in the Oval Office. That luck has run out.
Well, I will tell people that you have one of the positive consequences of your voice issues is that you have redoubled your efforts on your writing, and I encourage everybody to check you out at libertynation.com. I will leave you. We'll let you go now and call this a win for your return to the return to the ring in the Uprising.
Well, just declare victory.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like we're going to have war. What we should have done in Vietnam: declare victory and leave.
We're going to have socioeconomic correspondent Jeff Charles on the podcast later on, and we're going to talk about the Gavin Newsom recall election. I will leave you just as a teaser. Give me an exit poll. You think, is he going to be the next governor of California? Is he going to survive his recall or not?
Boy, I tell you, I've been teetering back and forth, believing he will survive and then believing he won't. I think if I had to predict, I'd say that Newsom survives barely, unlike Cuomo.
Prediction logged. Thanks so much for joining us, Tim. Catch you next time on The Uprising.
Always, always, always a pleasure.
Welcome back to The Uprising, libertynation.com socio-political correspondent, sometimes substitute host of The Uprising and a host of his own podcast, A Fresh Perspective, with Jeff Charles, the self-named Mr. Jeff Charles, and a California native by way of Texas now. And that's important, Jeff, because of what we're going to talk about. But first of all, welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Welcome back to The Uprising. So I saw a couple days ago, so you were from the Los Angeles area until you were just about a teenager, and then you moved to another area of LA. And then how long have you been a Texan?
I've been in Texas for almost 10 years, actually.
So before it was cool, you became a Texan. All right, well, good. So I was surprised. I saw, the 538, forget the guy's name, but he's like the official pollster, certainly of the left anyway. And he predicted that it was a 1-point race for Gavin Newsom's recall. For people who don't know, the election is on September the 14th. And the first thing people are going to do is choose whether they want Gavin Newsom to remain in office. And if they choose no by a majority, then it'll be the question will become, who do you want to replace him? And that person can win by a plurality, which is to say they can get less than 50%. But if they get the most votes, they're going to win. Majority or plurality wins for that. And it was a 1-point race, Jeff, on I'm looking now. From the 12th of August, it was less than a point, basically all of August until just now, the 24th. And some things have come out about one of the challengers, and we can talk about that. But tell me, what is your sense of things in California with the recall election?
Yeah, look, I mean, people are galvanized. I mean, I think what we're seeing here is The Democrats are very concerned in California. They actually think that there's a good chance that Newsom will lose and be recalled.
They're terrified, right?
They are. You know, I was actually a couple of weeks ago, I was on a left-leaning radio show, and she had me on for about an hour when this was one thing that we were talking about. And she's in California, Los Angeles. She's terrified because she actually thinks that this could happen. And she noticed what a lot of people have noticed. Republicans are on fire. They want to get out there and vote this guy out. But it's not just Republicans. It's even people who are more in the middle, more on the left. Like they don't like this guy. They don't like a lot of the things that he's done with the pandemic, with the lockdown orders. And even the ones who are Democrats and maybe don't mind him so much, they're not excited about helping him keep his job. So these people are not fired up, but the other people, they are. So there is a very good chance that turnout is going to make a difference. But I think it'll probably even make a difference even beyond this whole election.
It seems to me from, true outsider's perspective, I'm all the way across the country. And it just seems like they basically ignored, so they meaning the critical mass of California Democrats that either needs to stay home or turn out, that they thought, well, we'll just kind of ignore this. It's not that big a deal. And then the numbers came in and it was like, oh my, this is real. We may lose all the goodies that we get with Gavin Newsom as governor. I saw the unions; they're now in hyperdrive to try to stop this. There's like so many people whose paychecks depend, and not in a way that would not like his aides. Of course, their paychecks depend on it, but all these trickle down folks who make their living off the taxpayers of California, and they're at risk now.
Yeah, they are. And I think they underestimated the sentiment that's out there, or the sentiment with the COVID lockdowns, the other things that he's been doing, the hypocrisy that he's displayed on numerous occasions when it comes to COVID rules. I think they
that famous. Well, let me just stop you right there, because the best one was that famous shot of him at the French Laundry restaurant, which is, for foodies, it's regarded as like the best restaurant in the country. And he ignored the lockdown and mask orders to go have a spendy dinner there. Yeah,
it was beautiful. It was on full display.
It's a let them eat cake moment for sure.
It really was. I mean, good for thee, but not for me, right? I mean, that's the mantra that these people will go by. And he's not the only one, but still, I mean, it was that. There's also the issue of AB5, which is being considered even at the federal level. A lot of people are gig workers in California, and it's already hard enough in California to essentially have your own business. This made it a lot harder for people that I've known. So there is a lot of anti-Newsom sentiment, and I do think that they underestimated it. They didn't think it was bad as it was, and now they're trying to play catch up. But the trend is already going in the direction you just listed off the poll results just now. So it'll be very interesting to see how this turns out. And to me, whether he's recalled or not, this could create a sea change in California, because usually it's always assumed that the Democrats going to win. It's always going to be the Democrats. And a lot of Republican voters in California, and there are a lot, have become disenchanted because of the way the system is set up.
Oh, they just feel like why even bother, right? I mean, yeah.
Exactly. And a lot of people don't know this, but between Los Angeles and the Bay Area, most of that is red. I mean, it's the major cities that are really blue that drive everything.
And everything to the east, right?
Yeah,
the inland,
exactly.
The inland areas. Yeah,
the Inland Empire, which is where I lived as well. And I think that this could even galvanize things further. If it's even close, if he even gets close to being recalled and he still keeps his job, I still think it'll show Republican voters, hey, maybe we aren't disenfranchised. Maybe we can actually make a difference and actually get more influence in this state. So I see this beyond even just Newsom.
Well, the other thing, so let's talk about the Elder thing for a second. So Larry Elder is the number one current poll winner for, if they ditch Newsom, if that gets a 50% plus one vote to toss him out of office, then the next question again is, who do you want to replace him? And right now, Larry Elder has a big lead in that he's at 21%. And the next person down is somebody called Paf Rith at 7.8%. I don't even know where Ms. Caitlyn Jenner is on this list, who was But that's a huge number, and now the long knives are coming out for Mr. Elder. Well, that tells you how scared they are. I think is that we've now got. It seems like any male who gets to a certain prominence is going to have an issue like this. But this woman whose name this is Larry Elder's former fiance and longtime radio producer, Alexandra Datig, Datig. Do you know about the latest with this?
Yeah, I know that she accused him of brandishing a weapon while they were arguing.
Well, here's where it gets great. There's where you really have to bear down on the details, Jeff. So, first of all, it was 2015 that this alleged argument happened when they were engaged to be married and living together. And what she says is, by the way, I got the report right here in front of me, and it's now you may not you're not going to key in on this one data point that I think is. It tells the whole story, but you're going to enjoy this. All right, so here's where we go. Oh, by the way, so first of all, it also includes the tawdry sexual detail where he wanted an open relationship and she didn't like that. Like that's somehow relevant to
I didn't know about that one.
the current gubernatorial race, or B, this allegation, which by the way, she went to the police department to make a report on
last week, right?
A 2015 incident. Okay. And she talked to the LA Robbery Homicide Division. And just like the name implies, those people are expert detectives for robberies and homicides. If you get a multiple shooting in LA, these are the Cracker Jacks that are supposed to go investigate it. Mm-hmm. And this is a 2015 incident. This is her words, okay? Quote, he was angry and exhibited hostility towards me in the form of silent scorn during our conversation. Silent scorn. And then here's where it goes on, though. He proceeded to open the drawer and reached inside, this is, I think, a nightstand, for his .45 caliber revolver. Making sure the firearm was in my view, he opened the cylindrical rotating part of the revolver, checking to make sure the gun was loaded with cartridges. He proceeded to close the cylinder again, making sure the firearm was in my view, and then proceeded to put it back in the drawer. All right. So he didn't point a gun at her, and he didn't say that he was going to do anything with it. So that could easily be misinterpreted for whatever the effect he was going with, if he even did it. But here's a detail that I know in a future Jeff Charles will appreciate this, that there's not really a thing as a .45 caliber revolver. Gun people know this, Jeff. The way a .45 caliber round is constructed is it's a semi-auto round. Mm. Firearm cartridges that are meant for revolvers have what are called rims on them. And a .45 caliber is a rimless cartridge. And in fact, it's precisely because of the ability to put it in that cylinder and have it stop that the rim exists. It's basically just a little ledge that makes it stop. Now, there are some very specialized guns that are designed to shoot a .45 caliber out of a revolver, but they're rare as hen's teeth. And almost certainly Larry Elder did not have one for this. It's a real oddball item. Mm-hmm. I know guys that have got a million guns and they don't have one of those. It's just an atypical gun to have. And so the point is to remember everything with such specificity, but then misremember why call it a .45 caliber if it's not. I just thought it was totally indicative of yeah. So I think it's either she's being put up to do it, or that she believes it, but is being put up to do it with such effort.
It's always so convenient when these stories come out, right?
And also, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, right? So that's the other thing that sort of comes to mind. But Larry Elder is a fascinating candidate. And I want to play this little clip here.
So then why get into this race so late? What was it about the other 45 people on the ballot that made you say they're not good enough?
Well, that wasn't why I got into the race. Arnold Schwarzenegger, by the way, got into the race late. I was trying to decide whether or not I wanted to do it. Morgan, I have a good life. No one's picking over my private life, at least not the way they've done since I've gotten into this race. I was making a good living. This is threatening all of that. So I really wasn't sure I wanted to do it. But so many people I respect approached me, including Dennis Prager, without whom I wouldn't be on the air, Pastor Jack Hibbs, a woman named Jenny Sand, and a longtime friend of mine who is now my campaign manager, Lionel Chetwynd, a longtime filmmaker. who has done the film Hanoi Hilton. And he also approached me and asked me to run. But I still didn't want to do it, Morgan. And so I began talking to normal people, like my barber, like the guy who owns a company who drives me. Every now and then he drives me himself. And I asked normal people what they thought I should do. And I was surprised how many people thought I could contribute. I've been writing about things like the rising cost of living here in California, that for the very first time, people are now leaving the state. And it's not just millionaires and billionaires, although they are. The exodus of companies leaving California for the first 6 months has exceeded the exodus at this time last year. Middle-class people are leaving. I've been writing about that. I've been writing about my position of choice in public education. I'm a product of public education. And my school was certainly inferior compared to some of the better schools in the area at the time. But the school that I went to, Crenshaw High School, recently, Morgan, I just checked, only 2% of kids can do math at state levels of proficiency. I've been an advocate for school choice. And I've been talking about the way this man has shut down the state, in my opinion, against science, while arrogantly flouting the very rules he's been putting down the throats of everybody else. So the more I thought about it, the more I thought I had been talking about these issues for a very long period of time.
You mentioned Governor Gavin Newsom shutting down the state against science, like you said. So I'm going to ask you a few natural follow-up questions that have been asked in the debate. What would you do to protect, for example, school children?
Well, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I've been vaccinated because of my age category. I'm at a higher risk. Also, I've got a rare blood condition, and my doctor strongly advised me to be vaccinated. And I think people who are in high-risk categories, given their age, ought to be vaccinated. But I also think that there's freedom of choice in America. And a lot of people feel very differently about the vaccine. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris both said if Donald Trump told them to take the vaccine, they wouldn't do it. A lot of people feel they've already contracted the coronavirus and have natural immunities to it. And I was in Palm Desert not long ago on a campaign swing, and I went to a coffee shop and I noticed that half the wait staff was wearing masks and half the wait staff was not. The young lady who waited on me, she told me she was a senior in college, was not wearing a mask. And I asked her whether there was a policy in the shop, and she said no. Our boss allows us to wear a mask if we feel we want to or need to. And allows us not to wear one if we don't want to and don't feel that we need to. And I asked her whether she'd been vaccinated. She said she hadn't. And I said, may I ask you why? She said, you can ask, but smiled and said, but I don't have to tell you why. I think this is America. And I think parents should make the decision on whether or not they want their children to wear a mask and going to school, whether or not they want their children to be vaccinated. And I think private businesses should also make that decision. But as governor, if there are state-mandated masks and state-mandated vaccinations or tests for people who have not been vaccinated and their state workers, I'm going to repeal those.
So yeah, I know I've seen your social media post where you said that you would repeal it on day one. So I guess the next question is, would you get in the way of local mandates if a local school district wanted to impose a mask mandate?
No, I would not. I would recommend against it. I think local municipalities have a right to be foolish. I don't believe in rent control, for example, but I think that if a local municipality wants to impose rent control, they should have that right to do it. Private schools have made different decisions, and I would imagine local districts are going to make different decisions. But parents are also going to make their own decisions. And I think one of the reasons that we're having a greater push for choice in education, which I'm a proponent of, is because a lot of parents don't feel that their kids should be mandated to wear masks, don't feel that their teachers should be mandated to be vaccinated. And I think a lot of parents are going to be making decisions that are going to be very inconsistent with what school boards want. And I think it's going to cause more and more parents.
Speaking about being clean, what do you think about Gavin Newsom's order to make all cars clean or energy efficient by 2035? They all have to.
I don't think much of it at all. I think that even if you were to make California carbon neutral by whatever year he says, it will have virtually zero effect on the climate when you have countries like India and China spewing out CO2 left and right. So I don't think it'll have any effect whatsoever, except cause another greater loss of middle-class jobs and working-class jobs. There has been a war on the middle class, a war on the working class by the politicians in Sacramento and by Gavin Newsom.
What do you think about Caitlyn Jenner and Kevin Faulconer calling for you to drop out of this race?
I don't think much of it one way or the other. I've not made any negative comment about my Republican rivals. The real target is Gavin Newsom. 51% plus one must vote to remove Gavin Newsom. And voters need to be reminded of the arrogant way this man shut down the state. He also mandated mask outdoors, where his own 2 kids were at a summer camp not wearing masks. He exempted his own winery from the very mandates that he foisted down the throats of the Californian people. And nearly 1/3 of all small businesses are now gone. Unlike a lot of politicians, I have run a business. I ran a small business. It was a tiny business. I only had about a dozen employees at my peak, but it didn't go bankrupt. I didn't liquidate it. I sold it, and it kept going on for years and years. I think one of the problems we have in this state is a whole bunch of people in Sacramento have never run a lemonade stand, and they're telling people who run businesses what to do.
He seems almost like a libertarian dream candidate to me, Jeff. And for people who can't see the picture, Larry Elder's a black guy too, which throws a whole other kind of wrench in the mix. If you are a black person in California and you've been, especially if you are fed a diet of the Black Lives Matter poison of we're all, we have to devolve into tribal fighting, does that actually accrue to the benefit of Larry Elder in this race, Jeff, because he is black? And those people now say, well, if I'm a Black Lives Matter person, who am I going to vote for? The black guy or the white guy?
No, I mean, they're going to favor ideology over race or skin color. I mean, you have to have the ideology that they want. And the thing with Larry Elder in California that we also have to remember, too, is that he has big name recognition on the right. Most people in California don't really even know who he is. And you have to be somebody who listens to a show or consumes conservative media.
He has a right-wing talk show, or
right.
Maybe right-wing is conservative is probably even better.
Conservative,
and free market talk show that is well subscribed, but not well enough known. He's not like Rush Limbaugh big, where people on the left or apolitical folks would know necessarily who he was.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I think the reason he's ahead as far as the other candidates is because of that name recognition, and because it is, even though there are people on the left and in the middle who want Newsom out, most of it is coming from the right. So I don't think that his race or anything is going to help him or hurt him in this, but I think that it's just going to come down to,
what if you just have a poster that says, sorry for interrupting, that just says vote Larry Elder, you put it in black neighborhoods, that just with a picture of him, you know what I mean? Maybe that's the way to do it.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, but again, I think it's just going to come down to, do Democrats stay home because they're not passionate about making sure Newsom keeps his job? And the other part to remember too is that people know that even if he's recalled and Larry Elder becomes governor, he's going to be up for re-election next year anyway. He's only going to be in that office for a year before he has to run for re-election, and anything can happen in that amount of time. So I think that there's also that as well. It's just going to depend on who's more fired up about what they want to happen with this governor.
What do you hear? I'm guessing that you have just a universe of people that you keep in contact with, maybe on Facebook or other, that, from your time in California. Do you see much chatter about this from generally apolitical types? Are they tuned in? Do they even plan on voting in this recall election? Like, what's going on with the people?
That's a great question. And that also figures into this. A lot of people, I mean, they know what's happening, but they're not tuned into this stuff. They're not tuned into what's going on with the recall. I mean, California's recalled a governor before, but still, a lot of people aren't even engaged. They're not engaged until there's an actual election coming around to vote for governor, president, or what have you. So that's yet another reason why I think a lot of people are going to stay home. A lot of them probably don't even know that that this is going to happen on the 14th of September, because they're just not plugged in like that. They're living their normal lives.
Keeping it fresh. Thanks so much for joining us on this Uprising, Mr. Jeff Charles.
Thank you.
We'll see you on the podcast and on the pages of libertynation.com.
All righty.
Well, thanks to Jeff. I have saved, however, the best story of the week for last. And I think it's a story. It's like I got to get a jingle like, you heard it here first on the Uprising. I don't think anybody's talking about this, but it is a story that affects Americans' liberty en masse. And boy, it's a huge win, all thanks to a hero patriot called Allison Patricia Taylor. She is a resident or frequent visitor to Saginaw, Michigan, where she's received a number of parking tickets that she wanted to fight. And in Saginaw, like they do in lots of places, the parking enforcers use chalk and they mark up the tire in order to indicate whether the vehicle has been moved or not. Well, she literally made a federal case out of it, went to the U.S. District Court, lost, and then went to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit and won. So we now have a federal appellate court case holding that it's unconstitutional for a parking enforcement person to chalk up your tire. It's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And it's just a great day for liberty when that happens. So take that precedent with you when you go to traffic court, and maybe your circuit will recognize this brilliant ruling. And a bit of sad news: we lost somebody unexpectedly this week in the Liberty Nation universe. Our writer Pennell Bird passed away, and he was a great writer. And I know he was an Uprising guest, so maybe you had the chance to hear him here. But if not, don't look for the Uprising episode he was on. Go to libertynation.com and read an article or two of Pennell Bird's. He really was a great writer, and he will be missed. Okay, that is it for this edition of The Uprising. Remember to hit Liberty Nation News for original articles, the Rabbit Hole podcast, and our signature television program, The Conservative Five. Just go to libertynation.com on your browser, or hit Rumble, YouTube, or check out our Liberty Nation News Roku channel. I'm Scott Cosenza. Thanks for listening and watching. This program is a production of libertynation.com. Conservative news where truth matters.
Who are we? We are Americans that believe in liberty. We are a project of the nonprofit One Generation Away. We are patriots who apply the founding principles to the issues of today.
And they keep moving the goalposts on us.
We are educators and commentators who love America and the Constitution. Who are we? We are Liberty Nation.
We are the Uprising.